everyone. My name is Ulrikke, and I am a sociolinguist from Norway. That means that I am interested in languages, and I am interested in how language relates to society, or how language use relates to society. I do research on how Norwegians speak English and why they speak English the way that they do. And I work in teacher education, so I try to make my research relevant for teachers and students. Can I get my slides on the... Thanks. So I thought maybe that before I start talking, I'd like to know briefly or roughly who my audience is. So can we do like a raise of hands? So can I ask, since I work in teacher education, I'd like to know, are there any teachers here? Yes. Excellent. Are there any students here? Hey, here we go. Are there any researchers here? I know that there are. Are there any parents here? You can raise your hands several times. Okay. So, wide audience, and I'll try and make this relevant for most, and I'm going to have you raise your hand a bit later as well. And this talk is about how English language media influences how young people speak English, and in Norway, and I think also in the Nordic countries. And the short and easy answer to that is that they hear English over and over again through the media, and then one day they just go, bleh, and there it is, right? And that's not wrong. No? Can you change the slide for me, or this one? There we go. We know from research that amount of exposure matters. So for instance, we have studies that show us that the number of hours that kids game correlates with the number of words that they know in English. So amount actually matters. But as you might have guessed, there is a longer and more complicated answer to that question. And it's this longer and more complicated answer to the question of how English travels from media to mouth that I will try and answer to give in this talk. So I thought I would structure my talk through these three claims. They're not taken out of thin air, so they're claims that are taken from research. And they are, number one, language shows who we are and who we want to be. Number two, language is always contextual. And number three, language changes like it or not. And I'm going to go through these one by one, and I'll spend most time on the first one because it's kind of a basis for the talk. And these are some terms I'll use throughout the talk, L1 and L2. So L1 means language 1. It's our first language, our home language, often called the mother tongue. And then L2 I use for any language learned after that. So it's not necessarily just the second language, it's any additional language. I'm going to test you guys later if you've understood this. And then also, I will use this sign to say something about what people often say to researchers like me. So they're not direct quotes, but what I often hear. So if we start with the first one, language shows who we are and who we want to be. I'll do a raise of hands again so that we can go through L1s. Remember, first language. So can you raise your hand if Finnish is your first language, your L1? Okay, and raise your hand if Swedish is your L1. That's about 50-50. And raise your hand if English is your L1. And if you have another L1 than those three. Okay, we are in a minority, the rest of us. Any of you kind of is thinking that Finnish and Swedish is my L1 and I'm not really sure how to order them? Maybe a bit, but not a lot. Okay, so now we know kind of the language repertoires here. And I want to start with my first quote, or what people often say. And I'll start with something that is related to the L1, and more specifically to dialect. So this is something I hear quite a lot. I softened my dialect when I moved to the city, but sometimes I use more dialect to show where I'm from, especially if I'm with someone from home. I asked my hosts when I came here to Finland whether people who speak Finlandssvenska would moderate their accent when they spoke to someone from Sweden. And they said that, no, well, most people think that Finlandssvenska is quite understandable, so they don't need to. But maybe if they move to Sweden, they might do so in order to fit in. And that's not strange, because we do that. We change our accent in order to fit in. So we want to use language to associate with other people. But we can also use language to dissociate from other people. For instance, if we think that people around us are a bit silly and we don't want to identify with them, we can speak different from them, right? So we use language to associate with people and to dissociate with people. Now, I'm especially interested in English. And this is a quote that I sometimes hear. Yep. I am schizophrenic when it comes to English accent. So I sometimes hear this from Scandinavians or Nordic people who have English as their L2. They say that when they speak to English people, people who speak English, they change their accent according to whom they're speaking with. Right? So they adjust, and they say, I'm nearly schizophrenic. But the thing is that what they're doing is accommodating. They're actually doing a really good thing. What they're doing is very helpful. They're getting closer to this other person so that they become more understandable. It actually shows language competence. But we don't want to get too close to, or we don't want to use language or change our language to get close to the other person if it goes against who we are or who we want to be. I've also heard the following quote: British English is so try-hard. Now, I've heard this from Norwegian teenagers who have English as their L2 when I asked them about which accents that people have in their classroom. Now, I've always been very interested in which accent Norwegian students want to use when they speak English. Now, it's not that they're so competent in English that they can do whatever they want in English, but they have strong opinions on which accent they want to have in English and which accent they don't want to have in English. 15 years ago, when I collected data for my PhD, Norwegian teenagers would group roughly into two. One, the biggest group would say, I aim towards an American English accent when I speak English. And a smaller group would say, I aim towards a British English accent when I speak English. But they would all agree that they would get a better grade if they used British English, because they thought that that was what the teacher wanted. So British English was then associated with school, which meant that if you aimed towards British English, you sounded like you were trying to impress the teacher. You sounded like you were trying too hard. You were a try-hard. Now, 15 years later, when I ask teenagers about this now, there are very few people left who say that they aim towards British English. Most of them say American English. It's become kind of a default. It's the normal accent. This goes for English teachers as well. There are very few English teachers who speak British English. Most of them speak American English. But even though teachers don't speak British English is still try-hard. And that's because when meanings get attached to language forms, it's difficult to tease them apart again. We call those language ideologies. And that means that we can use language to show who we are, to make an image. Can you change that? So can we then use language to show who we are the same way in L1 and L2? Well, not really, because there's proficiency. We are normally more proficient in our L1 than in our L2. And then there is emotion. We have emotions towards language. And research shows that we have stronger emotions connected to our L1, remember, first language, home language, than L2. So for instance, in multilingual families, parents say that they use their L1 with their child because it creates a stronger emotional connection. Poets say they have to use their L1 in their poetry because that is sort of the true language. It's the language of the heart. And then swearing. Research shows that swearing, there are stronger emotions connected to swearing in the L1 than swearing in the L2, which means that if there's a weaker emotional force of swearing in the L2, it's more acceptable to swear in the L2, right? So for Scandinavians or Nordic people who have Nordic languages, it might seem not a big deal if we swear in English. Yeah. So that might be one of the reasons why we have Finnish and Swedish and Norwegian kids running around saying swear words in English. Yes. And this brings me to my second claim, which is language is always contextual. Now, we know that, like, similarly to when we watch TV and we get lots of English at the same time, we know, for instance, that exchange students who go abroad, they are also immersed in a language. They learn a language quite quickly. And the thing is that they are exposed not only to all the language forms, but they are exposed to all the meanings attached to the language forms. And not just dictionary meanings, but also the appropriate meanings in different contexts. So the contexts that we participate in, they influence our language. Now lately, I've been hearing this a lot. Gaming makes children swear a lot. And yeah, that could be. Because when we participate in different contexts, we learn or we start using the language that is appropriate for that context. And for instance, if we game a lot, we might start swearing a lot, because that is actually quite appropriate in that context. And then we need to participate in different contexts to understand or to see that language varies between contexts. And something that is appropriate in one context might not be appropriate in another context. So in gaming, swearing might be appropriate, but swearing might not be appropriate in other contexts. Yes. So what happens then when we are exposed to context through the media? And one thing I'd like to say more is that this appropriateness of different contexts, it's not necessarily written down rules, right? They're often unspoken rules. So the appropriateness of language is something that we agree upon, the people involved. So they're not always easy to learn. We kind of have to participate in contexts in order to understand what language is appropriate in that context. So young people today, they participate in media context. So what happens then when we learn language through media? Well, it depends on the context again. It depends on the type of media. For instance, if you play strategy games, you might learn lots of new words, but you can also learn reading skills, because a lot of gamers, they read long manuals because they want to get better in their game. A lot of them will also interact with spoken language online with other gamers in other countries, and so they will develop interactional skills. But of course, if you're playing a car game and you're alone and there's no language in the game, you're not going to learn any language. Now, social media is different from gaming, because social media, for instance, TikTok, there's a lot of monologue, there's a lot of performance. So if you use a lot of TikTok, you might become fluent. If you mimic that type of media, you might become very fluent when you talk about something that you know about. But if you end up in a dialogue, you might struggle more. I've heard this lately from students. I am much better in English when I'm on my own. Because if you mimic the types, if you mimic the series you watch and the TikTok videos that you see, and you mimic that kind of language, that's the language that you will get, because we become better at what we do most. And that will bring me to this last bit about language changes, like it or not. And it's the young people who lead language change. They have the highest status in society. They are the most socially active. They are the most engaged in media. And that is why the older generation are always shaking their heads about the language of the younger generation. They say stuff like this. Again. Why are you using English words when we have perfectly adequate words in Norwegian or Finnish or Swedish, etc.? But the thing is that when they were young, their parents and grandparents shake their heads about their language. And when kids today grow up, they're going to shake their heads about their kids' language. And so it goes. And the thing is, they might not have adequate words for everything that they want to say. Because when we get new forms of language, new ways of speaking, they often appear because people have a need for them. They have a need to express new things that are happening in the world, new technologies or new perspectives. for instance, that's why we agreed to stop using racially loaded words, because they don't adequately represent our perspectives anymore. And that's also why new words are often related to new technologies. Yeah. Because language change reflects societal change. And again. And when we protest against language change, sometimes we're actually protesting against societal change, because we don't like it when the world changes. It's scary. But a bit of comfort, the language that adolescents use might not last, because they're using it because they're showing who they are, and often there are a lot, right? They're showing who they are, and they're showing who they want to be associated with. So they use more swear words and more English loan words, for instance. But when they grow up, they're going to need to show different things, because they will become different things. And so they will probably stop doing a lot of what they're doing now, because they want to be associated with other groups of people. And then some changes, language changes will stay, because some societal changes will stay. But there's a lot of things that goes on when we decide to use the language that we use. And that is how media, language travels from media to mouth. Thank you. Should I? Yeah, can I take questions? Yeah? You get a microphone there, I think.
I travel a lot in the Nordic countries, and here people speak their native language, and I have a feeling that one of the Nordic language countries are using more English loan words or English words than the others. I'm not going to say which country it is, but I'm curious if there is statistics about that, and if there is a significant difference, why could that be?
Mm-hmm. You're thinking about Denmark, aren't you? It depends how you count. Yes, there are statistics, but it depends how you count. Because Denmark might not have as many loan words as other Scandinavian countries, but they might not change the pronunciation. So we might get, and so there's different, like loan words will have different stages of getting into another language. So you can, a loan word, if it stays for a long time, it becomes kind of assimilated into the country, and you won't note the language, and you won't notice them anymore. So statistically, if I remember correctly, Denmark doesn't have more loan words, but they might not change the pronunciation of them. Yes, there are statistics, but it does depend on how you count it. And very excitingly, if you look at attitudes towards loanwords, if you ask people explicitly, the Danish are most open. But if you ask them implicitly, if you investigate their attitudes toward loanwords without telling them that it is the attitudes towards loanwords you're after, they are not as open.
We've got time for one more question here, if anybody wants to raise a hand.
It means I've told you everything you need to know. And I'm very much looking forward to the panel later.
Thank you, Ulrike. We take now a small break, and we continue then with the panel discussion.
lull, a hush settles over the.
Is it time? I think it may be time.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'll start by saying, ladies and gentlemen and fellow potty mouths, welcome to this panel. And it was super exciting to hear you, Ulrike, talk about, for instance, identity, which may be one of the reasons why we swear, I think. And with me here on stage, I have Kristi Beers-Fegersten from the University of Södertörn.
Yes.
Helka Hilmisdottir from the Artni Magnusson Institute of Icelandic Studies, and Liz Peterson from Jyväskylä University. And we're here to discuss swear words, but before we start, I'd like you to comment on these beauties. I've got one here for Helka, drawn by the wonderful Milla Paloniemi, and here's a hedgehog swearing in Icelandic.
Finally.
I'm not sure whether I should even try to pronounce this, but I think I can be generous enough and make an attempt. Helvetis djöfulsins av anskotans. Would you like to correct me, please?
Helvetis djöfulsins anskotans.
Anskotans. And what does the helvetes djävulens, hell and devil, I understood, but what was the last?
Fandens.
Yeah. Some
These are quite strong Icelandic traditional swear words of religious origin, of course. And I thought, since the hedgehog is so angry, it doesn't really fit with anything else than these really strong Icelandic traditional swear words that you can repeat and use in different, or can usually if I'm really angry, I use all three of them, and I organize them in different ways. You know,
Sometimes more is more.
You can also say djöfulsins anskotas helvitis, or and rearrange them.
I was
as
just
you
going to
want.
ask you, under what circumstances might you utter such a...
I did use it last week. I'm not going to comment on why, but I was really angry at some point last week, and made me think that about this. That I use the old traditional Icelandic swear words when I'm really angry. Usually at someone else.
Yeah, you swear from your toes. Yeah.
Also when also in that kind of cases.
Yeah, of course, when you hit your toes, but when you really.
But when there are minor incidents, I often say just shit.
Beautiful. Jävlar anamma, this is for Kenneth. And jävlar anamma is both a swear word, but it's also kind of sisu, strength, and what gives you power in a empowering way sometimes. But it can be used as a swear word, and you can. Is there a microphone around? Would we like to hear why Kenneth chose this? Okay, we'll have it later. Oh, yeah, we'll take it later if there's time for that. And this is something entirely new for me, for Chris. Ja pierdole. I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce it in Finnish.
That's pretty accurate pronunciation.
Okay.
It's a Polish swear word.
Polish swear word. It's beautiful.
I love it. Whenever I'm going driving, ja pierdole kurwa, you just scream it out.
Kurva I understand, but what does the pierdole mean?
I was like, what the hell, man? It's very exciting.
Pretty. Hey, Kristi, Helka, and Liz, why do we swear? Do you want to start, Kristi?
I can start. We need to swear. We have just basic needs to express when we are feeling something strongly. And mostly we think about swearing when we're feeling rather strong negative feelings. So when we are extremely angry, or when we have stubbed our toe and we are feeling pain, when we're frustrated. I think these are the stereotypical emotions or feelings that we have when we swear. But we need something that we can say to release those feelings, and also let others know this is how we're feeling. So these words are powerful because we share an understanding for what they mean, and also what they what they not just definition meaning, but what they convey as well.
Does it work? You know, for example, when you stub your toe.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely. And we have just had a conference on swearing, and we've heard research that shows that if you are in pain, it does absolutely help you withstand that pain if you can swear. So it does.
I'm relieved to hear that.
I'd
Yes.
like to say one thing there that from a linguistic point of view, the fact that every language in the world, we've got something like 7,000 languages, the number is a little bit negotiable. Every single language has a way to swear. So we can call that a true universal, and I think that really tells us something. Every single language has its own way of swearing. So
I even read that not only humans but also animals. There was chimpanzees, according to a study, they can pick up turds, pick up shit, and wave it about when they're angry at somebody. I read that in a study. I can't give you the references now, but
I think we can all relate.
But why do you think young people or people in general tend to code switch to English when they swear? We heard Ulrika talk about this before, but for instance, or do you swear in other languages, or is it English?
Who wants to take that?
I sometimes use English words, and particularly my children do. I don't really consider English swear words as code switching anymore. They've become like a part of the Icelandic language, and they have been adapted phonologically, and they also they're declined, so they can get like definite article and so forth. So it's they have really become integrated into the language, and children learn them quite young. So yeah. I mean, my children never swear in Icelandic because, of course, I'm a good role model, and I don't swear at home so much, not out loud.
So we've heard.
So they, I mean, I don't know if they really hear Icelandic swear words that often, not at least those strong ones. But and at school, I don't think the teachers swear that much either, at least not when they're younger. So what they, I mean, the main input is, of course, when they're watching videos and they are watching YouTube channels and gaming videos and so on, and so they hear a lot of English, of course, swear words there. So I think they hear a lot more English swear words than Icelandic, or at least the strong ones.
And I gather you said that they're sort of Icelandicized when they are used in an Icelandic context. The English swear words. What would it sound like? You said they get Icelandic forms. Can you give us an example?
Hvað í fokkanum þetta? What the fuck is this? Hvað í fokkanum? So it's yeah.
Icelandic indeed.
Yeah, but fuck is of course a word that also existed in Icelandic with another meaning before the English word became so well known. So it's kind of blended with an old word, like the English swear word has blended in with a Danish loan word that came in I think in the 18th century into Icelandic. So it's a bit complex situation with fuck, for example.
What was the meaning of that word?
Fuck was like light or silly kind of work, or like if you weren't really doing anything serious, you just like hanging around, or if you had a problem, like fuck was some kind of problem also. So it, yeah.
So it had meanings that were adaptable in some way.
Yeah. And then it kind of, the English word kind of took over. So people don't really know the Danish or the Danish loan word anymore and that original meaning. But we have, it's very integrated into Icelandic.
And how do you, Christia and Liz, being native speakers of English, react to having people code switch to your language when they swear? Will you start?
Yeah, I could start. I love it. I'm always so happy when I hear people using English swear words, and I try to eavesdrop a little bit. But I pay close attention to the norms of swearing in Swedish society and compare them to the norms I'm familiar with. I'm American, and we have very, very different norms for swearing. And in Sweden, you can come across swearing in the newspapers, like the daily newspapers. You just don't see that in America. You hear it on TV, on the radio, in podcasts. It's so easy to swear in English, so the norms are very, very different. And just as an example, I think everybody knows about Eurovision, and in Sweden we have something called Melodifestivalen. And one year there were 3 program leaders who opened up the show, the final for this melody, the song contest that chooses a song that goes to Eurovision. These 3 program leaders opened the show by saying, "Välkomna to Mello fucking D Festivalen." And this is a program that is watched by a huge portion of the Swedish population. And of course, I just thought that was fantastic. I mean, this is you just would not encounter anything like this in America. So it really helps me understand what are other people doing with English swear words. And yeah, it's fascinating. I love it.
It was a fantastic example.
Yeah, I find it a little bit shocking, and like you said before, it just feels so good to swear in your native tongue, and it feels like it loses some of its punch. It's like, I want to be able to say fuck, and it's like, wow, it's shocking, but everyone's just like, yeah, that's cute. Is that all you got? Right?
So do you upgrade your swear words?
To what? Yeah, I do not swear in Finnish. I've lived here for 20 years, and okay, sometimes I say paska or paskat because that sounds kind of cuter. Like everybody knows that many shits is cuter than one shit. I don't know what the logic is there, but I never say the V word in Finnish. I never say perkele, except for I just said it, but to me it's just like liian vanha, like too much, too strong. So I stick with the English, but I do sometimes swear. I say scheisse for some reason, even though I don't speak German. Because I think part of what we love about swearing is that it's playful. And we see these wonderful examples here and what Mila's drawing, that it lends itself to play and to fun and to kind of pushing the limits of who we are as society, what we can do with language. It's just such a fascinating and creative part of the language. So.
Because I was thinking about we're discussing the functions earlier, that you use it for pain relief, for expressing anger or frustration and so on. But then what is the purpose of swearing in media, for instance? What function does that serve?
I have proposed that, and I also am speaking from a Swedish perspective, that Swedes are really familiar with the situation in America. It's commonly known that you're really not allowed to swear. There's a lot of restrictions on swearing in America, in English, of course. But those restrictions on English swear words don't apply in Sweden. So I always feel that Swedes swear in English because they can. And they know that Americans, for example, may not. And there's kind of a joy in that, in doing something with these words that the people who sort of own them are not allowed to do. So they revel a little bit in using English swear words.
Na, 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 na.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to include the audience here. I saw that there are many, both Swedish speakers and Finnish speakers, and I would like to know that how many of the Swedish speakers here swear in Finnish? Do you also swear in Swedish? I didn't get an exact hand count here, but it seems that it's quite usual that you swear in Finnish. What about Finnish speakers here? Do you swear in Swedish? A few? So the Swedish-speaking words to look at Milla over there.
Yeah.
Fan! With several exclamation marks. But it's not. It doesn't have the same explosive sounds as perkele, for instance.
My husband is an L1 speaker of Swedish, but he never swears in Swedish. He always says, perkele, vitt. He's not here, so don't tell him I said this, okay? Yeah, there's so much more joy, I think, so much more satisfaction when you
they're
swear.
quite explosive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thanks. I had a comment from the audience, and I think we might. Nu är det väldigt otrevligt det här, and in Finland you would say something with a lot of profanities, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, a common notion among non-swearing people is that people who swear because they can't express themselves in other ways. How would you comment on this?
Oh, that's bullshit.
Fucking bullshit.
I mean, what's wrong with using you asked earlier, why do young people use English words, English swear words? Christy said because they can't. Language is such a gift for humans. Why shouldn't we use the full extent of it? Why, as linguists who actually, we do the science of language, I think you'll not find any of us who says, oh, you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't. It's language. Use it. Love it. Hate it. Just feel something. Do something with it. Use everything.
Yeah, I agree.
Even the ugly bits. Use
I mean, what should you say instead? I'm really angry now.
Or something like shoot. Järnvägar. Perhana.
But I've scratched a little there and tried to get a little bit further down to the bottom of that question. And what I've found, what people have told me, is that it's not a question of people getting angry. Oh, you swear you don't know any other words. There's so many other words to use. It's rather that people are angry that you are making a judgment about the situation that does not jive with my judgment. I judge this situation as one where we shouldn't be swearing, but you are swearing. So really, what I'm saying is that, you don't know any other words, you're only using swear words. I'm saying you shouldn't be using swear words right now, because I think we all understand we know other words than swear words. And sometimes people, it becomes this kind of habit. It's hard for them to break it. They just use swear words. But what we're really getting angry at is that we're not sharing the same kind of judgments of the situation we're in, and someone's using swear words in this situation, and they're not using other words, and that bothers us.
But I would also like to emphasize how smart people usually are about using their full repertoire. Like, I probably wouldn't swear in church. Of course, I don't go to church, but if I did, I wouldn't swear that. Like, we all know this. And if you're speaking to your grandparents, or maybe, I don't know, the rector of the university or something, you might not swear. We're really, really good at reading these social situations and knowing, okay, I can do this here, but maybe I'm not going to do this. So,
Yeah, I've recorded conversation with young Icelanders, and I have like 22 hours of conversation with people in school setting, and I don't think there's any swear word in those conversations. And then I have a few hours of young teenage boys playing video games, and it's like the most common word of all in their conversation. It's almost as common as the infinitive marker or the preposition in. So it's really high up there, and they say like fuck and shit and damn quite a lot.
So Ulrika's point, context, context. And people are, even young people, they learn so quickly. Tiny children kind of know these rules too, not just with swearing, but with language use in general. It's amazing.
But they didn't use any Icelandic swear words in those conversations, just the English ones.
It's interesting.
But
Because
we
they're
also
not really angry.
sorry.
Sorry.
But we also know that people learn because this phenomenon of slipping, of accidentally using a swear word or saying a swear word and then you, oops. So we know when, I think it's happened to many of us that we've maybe used a swear word and then we realize, ooh, that wasn't, this is not the situation, use that swear word. So just having that feeling, that reaction, tells us that we are activating this kind of, scanning the situation. Is this okay for swearing? And if we scan incorrectly and we use a swear word, we can feel it. It's almost this physical reaction, like, ooh, that didn't land.
I remember once sharing on social media that I had stepped into a puddle of icy water this time of year, and got my feet wet just outside of kindergarten. So I just taught these kindergartners a lot of juicy words that they possibly didn't know. And there was somebody commenting on this, that how can you, as a mother and as a linguist and as a journalist, set this kind of example?
Oops.
And I answered with, in this situation, I was neither of this. I was just a person getting her feet wet and really, really cold. And that was what happens.
Yeah.
And the person who was criticizing me, she said she could relate to that.
Yeah.
I thought, of course, I see. And then the context is a situation where you might not mind your language very much.
Yeah.
But hey, I'd like to hear more about these situations that you have observed in your research, where swearing occurs, and what languages are observed. Would you like to? Would Christy, for instance, want to say more? You told me about this Melo fucking D festival and media things, but are there what other contexts have you observed?
I have looked a lot at comic strips, so comic strips in Swedish, and observed that English language swearing very often serves as the punchline. So these are funny, humorous comic strips that are in maybe 4 panels, and by the time you get to the 4th panel, that's where the joke is. And very often, too often for it to be just random, that joke, that punchline is in the form of English language swearing. So that tells us that, like Liz was saying, it's fun to play. It's really fun to play with other people's swear words. And Swedes know English really well. They consume a lot of English language popular culture. They're exposed to English swear words, and they play with them. They find them funny. And we know that because of the context that it's in, like putting it in that final position where we're expecting humor, we're primed, we're ready for it. We see that swearing, and it's funny, and that kind of teaches us. Someone has to think, oh, swearing is funny, and then it teaches the readers, oh, swearing in English is funny.
I'm seeing images here. I studied you before this, and realized you also studied drinking in comics.
Yes.
Are these incidentally the same comics, or are they different?
They are the same, yeah.
So swearing and drinking goes hand in hand.
Maybe. It kind of does. I mean, I think that alcohol loosens the lips a little bit, so it becomes maybe we lose our inhibitions and we maybe swear a little bit more when we're tipsy.
Speaking of that, drinking and swearing, I mean, the most iconic swearer in Icelandic culture, at least, are the translations of Tintin, where you have Captain Haddock, which is quite famous for very creative swear words, or and the translation is quite good in Icelandic.
There are 2 translations in Swedish, where both good, but the later one is even better. And these are swear words that you can actually show to children. Sakramentskare landekrabba, anfekta och namma. I don't know. I think you could probably give examples on how Captain Haddock swears in Icelandic.
I don't remember any right now. Maybe some of the audience can help me.
Anyone remember Tintin?
Yeah, alliteration, a lot of alliteration. And often when people complain about the use of English swear words, they often mention, it was better before, for example, in Captain Haddock, he knew how to swear. So it's some kind of a role model of good swearing, even though I don't think it was really that fancy, even back in the old days, the Icelandic swearing.
But then it might not work because it doesn't break any taboos.
Well, no, maybe not, yeah.
What about you, Liz? Do you have any
they
examples?
talked about specific context, but I would like to maybe talk about swearing at a more abstract level, so sort of just more socially. And I think that we have this idea that the iconic examples of swearing are, like Christy said, if you stub your toe, or if you hit, for some reason we're always thinking about people hitting their thumb with a hammer, like who uses hammers anymore, But those are kind of the stereotypical examples of, you're angry and you have to express the emotion. But we use swearing in all kinds of, I would consider, more positive emotional contexts as well. Like many of the researchers who have been here for the conference, we talk about things like how you gain solidarity with other people, because if you're really comfortable with somebody, then you can just let it all hang out and you can let those swear words flow. So it's a way of saying, I love you, you know, you're one of my people. That's if you can get to that comfort level with somebody. And it's also a way of kind of testing the boundary to find out, oh, is this my person? I'm gonna take a little risk here and use this swear word and let's see how it goes. And that can kind of backfire on you, but it can also be like a secret handshake that helps you enter a whole new phase in your relationship with that person.
Yeah, I can. That sounds familiar. Let's put it that way. How do you react to this, or do you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if there's much more to say about it, but I think that we can kind of relate. Maybe we've all been in a situation where it's almost like a game of chicken. Who's going to swear first? And then it happens, and it just okay. Then we'll swear. And you do it. It is kind of this signal that it puts a different like aspect to the. It relaxes people.
Could I say one specific example from our conference? Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, Nick, but we have a visitor here who's a researcher on physical therapy and talking about really careful use of swearing in the context of a physical therapist working with the patient and breaking that important barrier. So that was a great talk you gave today. Really appreciated it. So even using it strategically in what would be considered more of a professional setting and to create a relationship with a patient. I think that's wonderful.
I think it sounds super exciting,
Yeah.
this professional swearing, of setting a tone for a relationship. Neat. But hey, I'm still a little bit intrigued. You told me already that you don't swear in Finnish, but do you swear in Swedish then?
A little bit. I think I swear more in English, just because it's the default language. Like I said, it seems a little bit boring because it's so, when you're an
Everybody
English
else
speaker in
does.
today's world, it's like, oh, well, I'm not very special, but it's what I've got. So, for me, maybe it's because I'm too sensitive to the Finnish swear words. I mean, I've lived here for 20 years, it's ages, but somehow I don't kind of dare approach it because maybe I overthink it, but I've really never said the V word ever after in 20 years because it's just like, I can't quite make that leap. And perkele, I can only say it when I'm talking about it like this, but I would never go, oh, perkele. Like, no, just can't do it.
What about the C word in English? Would you use that?
I've been known to use it on occasion. Maybe just a little, once a year or something.
Sorry to maybe ask a too personal question.
Don't tell my mom.
What about you, Christy? You have lived in Sweden for several years.
Yes.
Do you swear in Swedish?
No, I don't. To be perfectly honest, I don't really swear in English. I don't swear in Swedish. Maybe I say swear words enough that it kind of satisfies whatever sort of need we have for swearing. But I do remember when I was in Sweden, I hadn't been in Sweden more than a couple of years. So I was still learning Swedish, and I was riding my bike, and I had like one of my kids, a really tiny kid on the back of my bike. And we were in sort of the posh area of Stockholm, and I had to get my bike up onto the sidewalk, and the curb was a little bit too high. And I tried to lift the bike, and I was still on it, and we fell over. And there was an older gentleman who happened to be right near me, and he came and helped me and my kid, get upright again. And I said to him, "Tack så jävla mycket." and as soon as it came out of my mouth, I just thought, what? And he went, okay. And I had to, we parted ways, and I started just walking with the bike, and I was thinking, where did that come from? Because clearly I am not a native speaker of Swedish. I'm this young woman. I have a kid behind me. I'm in this posh area of town, and it's an older gentleman. Where did that swearing come from? And it took a couple blocks before I remembered to check on the kid that he was okay, because I was so wrapped up in this swearing. And what I think happened is that it's not so much that I learned "tack så jävla mycket" as an expression, but I had heard "så jävla mycket" so many times that when I was saying "tack så," then it became "jävla mycket." And that it just came. I couldn't even control it, and I realized I'm picking things up, and I hadn't really developed a relationship to Swedish swear words yet. I knew immediately. No, that's not the way I talk. But I didn't have that kind of barrier or filter yet. So it was a really fantastic learning experience for me, because it made me more aware. And I also thought, wow, I'm really learning this language, because it just came out so fluently.
I think that was a lovely example of how you learning a new language and what slips to mind in certain situations. Yes, we have a question or comment from the audience.
Maybe you could have said the tax fucking.
That would make a nice experiment to see what the reactions would be, for sure.
There was the comment from the audience. Maybe you should have said "tack så fucking mycket." But it's the same when the way I react when I have people who just learning my language, or foreign people who when they start swearing in my language and it sounds more sticks out more. Sounds perhaps not more vulgar, but more pronounced when it comes.
Maybe that's part of why I don't swear in Finnish, actually, because I just feel like heads will. Who is this? It sounds somehow uglier or more noticeable coming out of the mouth of a foreigner, and I don't want to be like that.
Yeah. I never swear in Swedish. I grew up in Sweden as a child, even though I still speak Swedish and I studied Swedish at the university level, I never gotten to swearing in Swedish. Perhaps because I'm just stuck on the stage of growing up in Sweden and going to play school. Even though I do like fan as a word, because you can really prolong the A and it really sounds good, but I never, I think, swore in Swedish. I don't think so.
Yeah. Sounds,
But I do use sometimes German, but in a more humorous way. Like I like the language I've learned later in life. It sounds
Scheisse is a good
Scheisse
word,
is
isn't
very
it?
good,
Yeah,
but it's more in a
good.
humoristic context for me. I mean, I wouldn't say it if I was really angry.
But then German is good in general because you can say like Schmetterling and it sounds like you're really abusing somebody. But hey, we had a question there at the back, or a comment.
Yeah, it's cut along, so I don't know whether I should have a microphone.
I like this dialogue way that we can have questions or comments from the audience already. Now it's coming up.
Thank you. My name is Reiner Ekkertsson. I'm a lecturer in Icelandic here at the University of Helsinki. And I'm very much interested in history of language and literature. And as someone who has lived in Denmark for quite a long time, I was accused of swearing all the time in Danish, where I was using score.
Yeah.
The Icelandic, in Icelandic it's basically just an adverb, but in Danish it's considered as a swearing word, so good, sko. And that's a loan word into Icelandic. And so after this introduction, my question is, when does like fuck and shit stop being swearing in the Scandinavian languages or the Nordic languages and just become nouns or verbs or that don't have the swearing context of anskotas helvitis djöfulsins or vittu, or that they do have a different connotation in those languages?
Thank you, Reiner. Who would like to answer this? do we have an answer?
Yeah, well, it's a very complicated question, of course. I studied score. I did my master's degree on score in Icelandic, and I think that it's not really the same word. I mean, score is a particle in Icelandic, and I think it originates from skoðaðu, score. So it doesn't have the same origin. So it's not really the same word, even though people can misunderstand it. And Icelanders have often drawn parallels between this Danish swear word and the Icelandic particle. But I think it's a misunderstanding. But when does a word stop being a swear word? I mean, I sometimes wonder when my children use like fuck in totally neutral contexts and has no, they're just answering a regular question and there's nothing that calls for any kind of swearing or strong feelings or emphasis or anything. And I don't know. I don't think they really see it as so much as a swear word. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's difficult to give any answer to this.
What I've observed in Swedish is that if we take fuck, for example, that it has really become Swedish. It has the Swedish verb ending, so if you put an A on it, it's fucka, and then you can make fucka med, fucka los, fucka upp, and you can also spell fuck a little bit differently. I've seen it spelled F-A-K-K, F-A-C-K, which is actually another word. I think even F-A-A-K-K. So that the spelling kind of shows that there is an attempt to capture the way the word is pronounced with, a Swedish accent. And I think that once the English swear words get adopted into the Swedish linguistic system, then maybe they stop being recognized as an English swear word, and now they're maybe a Swedish swear word, but maybe that swear part of it starts to get neutralized, that it's a Swedish word that has been adopted into the linguistic system, but maybe the swearing aspect of it gets a little bit lost.
It's still a strong word, but it could be just in a way like fantastic is a strong word, emphasizing something.
Yeah. I would, so that Finnish speakers don't feel left out, of course, we find exactly the same phenomenon with Finnish. So my colleague Johanna Vattovar is here. We've done studies of swearing together. Yeah. And one study that we did was just beautifully showed how the word fuck in Finnish is with all the different case endings in these creative ways. Just what they're saying, it's definitely part of the Finnish language system at this point as well. So no surprises there. I had something, it's gone. Yeah, I'll come.
I also remember a discussion about the V word in Finnish, and when Finland Swedish people use it, that it's often doesn't have very strong meaning anymore, and that they use it very often in spoken language. Some people.
That reminds me what I want, if I could follow up on that, Helga, is that swear words we know, all languages have them, but they tend to be kind of specific. Like some languages seem to prefer, religion-based swear words. Some seem to prefer excrement or sex swear words. But even within a language, they can be on a rotation. So swear words that might sound really harsh today, in 50 years will be, oh, wasn't that cute? So I could perhaps predict that this might happen with the word fuck in Swedish and Icelandic and in Finnish. Let's see. But that something else will just come along and, okay, we've reached saturation point with this fuck word. Let's take this one now because we want innovate. Language change is what keeps language fresh and alive. So something else will come in. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I had a question about that actually, because it was, swearing is obviously as old as language and exists in all languages, and even may even be outside of, even non-humans apparently can want to express the same things, the things we do with swear words. And but as we have also discussed, society's attitudes towards swearing has changed, and what was shocking in the 70s, for instance, fuck in the movies, is now something very, very mainstream. So you had some kind of idea about some rotation or a pendulum or whatever. What are your visions of the future and swearing?
I am also super curious if we're going to reach a point where we're just tired of seeing and hearing swear words all the time. There's a little bit of a trend, I think, in especially streaming television series that just have a lot of swearing, because there was a time when you weren't allowed to swear on TV, and now that there's streaming, it's just people are rushing, to fit in as many swear words as they can. And I think that eventually we'll get bored of that. It's still a little bit of a novelty, but I think we'll get bored, and I think what will be more interesting is these programs where there is no swearing, and that will help us, and we'll be satisfied with that for a while, and then maybe people will start swearing again, and we'll find it novel one more time. So I feel like there's going to be kind of a wave that we'll hit a point where people are just tired of swearing. We'll let it go for a while, and then we'll bring it back until people get tired again. If we're thinking we're still using the same words, but maybe another direction is that we just keep borrowing other swear words from other languages. Maybe we'll get tired of using the English swear words, and it's time to look for new swear words from a different language.
And also in Icelandic, I noticed some examples of re-borrowing, like the word fuck, which has become so integrated in the language, and in recent years, when people or young people have so much access to videos and soundtracks, and they hear it more often, they've started to use the English pronunciation. So they, instead of saying fuck, which has been the normal way of saying it and spelling it in Icelandic, they say now fuck. So it's kind of a new, like they're borrowing it again. Without the phonological adaptation, which is quite interesting. And it's also, you can also see it for other words like crazy, which has been used in Icelandic youth language for decades, but suddenly they have started to say crazy with this extreme American accent because they hear it so much. So it's so iconic, this word, like everything is like crazy and girl and all these words that have like been re-borrowed with the American accent.
The youth always want to leave their mark in some way.
Yeah.
And they do.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what about if we're going to see more Shakespearean constructions, not that people dig out their Hamlets and whatnots, but start creating their own swear words in similar ways. I read Hamlet once, and I found this delightful description of Hamlet's stepfather, where he says that he out-Herods Herod. He's a worse Herodes than Herodes himself. And I thought that was brilliant. Really mean. I mean, that's a mean man being described here. Yeah, no F words needed. Hey, is there anything I haven't asked you? I think we've covered so much.
Maybe that's for the audience to
Yeah, we'd love to hear
decide.
from the audience.
As a Swede, I often hear, as also today, Finns saying that there are no really hard or bad swear words in Swedish. There definitely are, but they may not be used so often. So I was thinking about this. In both English and Finnish, sexual words are used as swear words. And we have them for sure in Swedish too, but they are still super bad to use. I mean, you only use them in very small groups or in groups where you know the people very well, and most people don't use them ever. So I would say that the sexual swear words in Swedish are harsher than they are in Finnish or in English. How come? I mean, we live in very similar cultures, so they should have become less bad in Swedish too. And I don't know what it's like in Danish
It's a great question.
I've heard that Finns tend to use quite vulgar swear words compared with many other languages, as does Russian. I think Polish here was also not the, pierdole was not necessarily very bad, but then you put on something that very much reminded of the C word. True, but the C word isn't used that much. And I was thinking about the V word used in Finnish, which can be, used in many different, you can make verbs out of it, and joku vituttaa when you're annoyed. And then in Swedish Finnish, we actually tend to use the F word similarly. Printään fittas. And or that something is fittit, which is, and somebody can be a fitty person, but then something can also be fittit nice. So it is used in quite similar ways as it is as the V word in Finnish. But that hasn't reached you yet.
But I think
It's really bad.
Yeah, it's always bad. Yeah.
I think in a way you've answered your own question. Well, it was a great question, but I think you've answered it yourself, because you've said we're not that different, but I think you're giving evidence that indeed we are different in some ways. So I could take an example from Danish. We have an expert on Danish swearing here, Marianne. Danish is the only of the Nordic languages, or Scandinavian languages, sorry, that uses sickness words for swear words. Isn't that right? Yeah. So they are, could you say it louder, please? Right? So they are distinct in some ways, and this is a beautiful example that you provided.
We have another question from the audience, or comment.
Hello, everybody. I would like to answer you that as experts linguists, that my experience about younger generations here in Finland anyway, so they are using these swear words quite a lot as filler words. So they don't notably always mean something bad things or signalize their anger. They are just using them all the time as filler words. So what do you think? What happened here?
I think it went off.
Well, anyway, that is my question. If you understood.
Yes. Actually, thank you for that question, because I think it raises a really interesting phenomenon with this kind of two-language system that if we think of the Swedish swear words, and you can fill in any other language there, and then the English swear words, the fact that kids, for example, and many other people besides kids are using English swear words. I think that they know that they're swear words, but they're maybe not experiencing the strength of these swear words like a native speaker would experience them. But what it does is that the use of English swear words, like an alternative swear word, helps the strength of the Swedish swear words be preserved. So we can use English swear words quite casually. They don't really mean anything. They don't affect us. They don't cost us anything when we use them. But we still are using swear words. We still have that kind of knowledge. I'm still using a swear word. But when we really have a strong feeling, we really want to have something said, then we have our native swear words. So for Swedes, it would be the Swedish swear words. So the power of Swedish swear words is actually getting preserved through the use of, or the addition of English swear words. And I think that's interesting because a lot of times English gets blamed for being this language that kind of takes over, and we start only using English words. And what happened with all our great Swedish words, for example? And in this case, the English swear words are absolutely not replacing the Swedish swear words. They are supplementing them and actually helping preserve really the inherent power of the Swedish swear words. I think that's a fantastic relationship to have. And it's a pity for native English speakers because we don't really have that system in the way that it's really established in the Nordics, especially with this English, the widespread use of English.
I would only just emphasize what, so our research, like I mentioned with Johanna Vattovar, shows exactly the same thing, that there's no competition between these wonderful Finnish swear words and English because they're used in different contexts, they're used in different ways. And I would say it not only preserves the Finnish, but even maybe emphasizes it because it's so much stronger. Like, you know, the word fuck is so cute, but my God, you've got perkele. What else do you want? Like, you've got it all. So, and they're not in competition. They're used in very different contexts and ways, and so they exist simultaneously.
There's another question from the audience.
That's a comment.
Comment.
And it's from the Scots example.
Oh, yes.
Maybe you're familiar, but Scots like to swear quite often in everyday speech. But the word which has been mentioned already, let's say the C word, is one which is used regularly, and it's a neutral word.
Yeah.
Right, and this is very interesting. It's mostly the tone that changes it. I could give you a few examples. Let's see. He's one of the good cunts. Right? That's positive. He's a total cunt. Negative. So it's all about tone. And it's really interesting that you have a sexual word, so-called blasphemous word in other contexts, or let's say in other cultures, in English-speaking cultures, but in Scots it's a neutral way to describe someone, actually, right? Male or female. So that's a really interesting example.
It is.
Where you can really change what that means by the way you say it. And I wonder if there's any examples in other languages.
I will say, the first time I ever went to Dublin, and I was this teenage American girl, and I got into a taxi. You see where this is going. Well, we said something about the cunt and the fucking weather, and I was like, oh my God, yeah. So even though it's my native language, it was very, very different use of swearing. Yeah. Great example.
The microphone is coming. A question or comment from the front row.
Well, me again, terrible. Well, anyway, just to reference these swear words, not always using these English ones. So I would say that I would like to express myself a very terribly way in Russian, which is suka plat.
I know that one.
Yes, so that was that.
Okay.
Did you know what it means?
Isn't it like bitch, like fucking bitch?
Expression.
Yeah.
Yes. And Russian people, they get crazy when you say that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Oh.
It's funny.
But I think it's so wonderful to hear what people swear, what people use for swear words in other countries. In Hemingway, I think, For Whom the Bell Tolls, in southern Spain, there's something about shitting in the milk. Cago en el leche, I don't know, I'm not good at Spanish, but that was something they used a lot. And in what other language do you use that for profanity?
Don't know.
Yes.
to pee in your breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
Okay. It's on its way. They're changing the batteries. I think there was something going on, something the matter with the microphone. Yes, there's a question or a comment in the back row.
I have been a teacher. I Swedish speaking Finn, and three small comments. The first is about the perkele, the Finnish. This is a religious. It is the name of the devil, and there are very much discussion about this origin. Is it from Latin per Hercule, or is it Percunus, the Lithuanian name for the devils? But it's very, very old. That Michael Agricola used it for the devil in Bible translation, and it was very, very used. When I was young, we said that the Finns has so little words because I'm Swedish speaking. They have so little words in their language. The Finnish they put perkel every other word. First the word, and when they talk about anything, and now is the word taken this place, that these religious words have dropped out of the language, and therefore somebody has not commented about these secular Nordic countries that Djävla or Djävul or things like that was the old swear words, and that was my first comment, and then these Finnish people has been accused to be racistic, and I'm not. I don't think so, because this integration is very bad in Finland. They say these foreigners and there's immigrants. I have heard young people of all races and religions talking that trains this year, last year, and nobody used an N word, but everybody, small girls and big girls and small boys and big boys from every country who is they used a word exactly like when I was young. The young people had used the perkele, every other word. So then I said that there has been a very good integration in Finland. Very good. There is no racism in Finland. Everybody talks the bad language. And my third comment, because I was a teacher, historian. The historian says that they started this swearing in English in Finland and every other country when the television in USA let in the 70s, or when they let people swear and talk bad language. You know that James Joyce Ulysses was banned because he used a C word or the F word, and was printed before the 50s in English language in England, and you said it was printed in French first. And my pupils, when I had history of movies, they didn't understand. I said that if you see, because they thought that the swearing in the language of the youth is a revolutionary thing, that they do it to oppose the grown-up people. And then I showed the first big movie about teenagers, Young Rebel with James Dean, and said, you shall observe, he never swears, he says bloody. Bloody is the most wrong word there. And he says sir, every time he talks with his father, he says sir. And they were quite shocked of that. So that was only a comment, but if there was a question of this history of when does these words become neutral and no bad, and that is one answer. Then, perhaps in the late 60s too, they started. I'm so old that I remember, and I know myself. I swear only to machines. The computer, and I always say perkele and jevar. I use those, and that's almost every time, every day, because these machines are made by the devil, not by the God.
Isn't there a band called Raged Against the Machine?
Yes.
But I think this brings us back to the conference and these past few days, because there were actually quite a few of the things mentioned here in the latest comment that are related to what was taking part on the conference these past few days. For instance, the way religion has been replaced by sexual words in the swearing, but also the fact that young people don't use the word bloody anymore, and there's been a decrease in that use.
Yeah, in English.
Yeah, in English.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. Would
Because
you
they
like to
cycle.
fill us in on the details about this? Is it the F word that has taken the place of bloody, or is it something else that has happened?
No, apparently there was a talk on that today, and apparently the F word, yes, has taken over for bloody, and it seems to be aging out. So there's not a new generation stepping up to use bloody anymore. But we'll see. I mean, maybe
it will come
it'll
back.
become, yeah, exactly. It'll be retro and hip.
And as Ulrika said, language changes whether we like it or not. But I think it sounds a little bit sad that bloody is going.
This iconic British English word, yeah.
Yeah. But also in your part of the conference where we're talking about this "fuck you, Putin," which is also the function of the swearing here is defiance and really taking a stance against the whole war in Russia.
But importantly, doing that in English so that it's a message available to the most amount of people as possible. Because we were looking at, my colleague and I were looking at sweaters, like knit sweaters that were made with, in very large block letters, the expression, "fuck you, Putin." And there were some examples, there were a couple of sweaters made with that same thing, but in the same expression, but in Ukrainian. But it's the English language expression that most people are going to understand. So it's important to think that this Ukrainian clothing company, they want to get that message out, disseminate it, and let lots of people know this is their stance. And right now, the situation is that you do that best in English.
And also not only make their own stance, but also engage other people in spreading the message. Hey, we're ending. We're nearing the end of the time we have, but there was time for one more question.
It's been so patient.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, there was actually no question, but I must say that I come from a family that was extremely creative as for swear words.
Lucky
My mother
you.
was excellent. She never swore in a formal way. When I got older, I understood that she had one swear word, but she never revealed it. She said in Swedish, I'm from Sweden, she said, "Det vet det gröne," that is, the green don't know. And I don't green know, she could say. And nobody, we couldn't imagine that was a swear word. When I'm a historian, and when I saw the drawings of Hieronymus Bosch later on in my life, if you remember from the Renaissance, Hieronymus Bosch, he drew the devil as the green one, the green man. So then I understood that my mother actually swore when she was raising up her 12 children, and I'm the last one of them. Wow. And I'm the only one that discovered that we had a mother that swore.
Like an inside joke, you're the only one who was witty enough.
Yeah. So True, and she had incredibly ways of describing her family. I was a crane neck because I was small, I was premature, and I was very meager, and I didn't have any what is this,
Chin.
I just had a neck. She called me crane neck when she was angry with me.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't like that, but now I approve her creativity. I could say more things, but I don't. Let's see. About the paper. Oh yeah, the Fananama.
Ja, just det.
No,
Jävlar
Jävlar
anamma.
Okay. No, you did it yourself. Thank you for your comments because I appreciate that word. What I appreciate as for swear words is that you can express only the guts in your inner. That's why I adore and that's why I adore Jävlaranama. But anyhow, the Jävlaranama has also a meaning that is very close to sisu, the positive one.
Grit.
Yeah. Guts. It needs guts to be able to do these things. But then I must just add the last thing. We in Swedish you can also put your shit everywhere, and you can put it in the vad heter fläkt? Fan. Han har skitit I fläkten, and you can also shit in the blue. Han har skitit I det blå skåpet.
You shit in the blue cabinet cupboard.
That's not too bad.
It's creative and lovely.
There are more to say, but I think that's enough.
Apparently that comes from back in the days when most furniture wasn't painted. And then there was this kind of blue that came into the households and became a popular color. Yeah. What is the piece of furniture you paint? Well, the nice cupboard where you have your linen and everything. Yeah. And you could put it this way, that shitting there is a faux pas. Breaking a taboo, certainly.
Oh, that's so neat.
Marta.
I have a question. So we've entered now a little bit to the more creative ways of swearing, but throughout the whole night you've been repeating how everybody uses the same sort of words, and they come over and over in all the Scandinavian and Nordic languages. But then in the beginning you referenced that in cartoons you can see something very creative, and I think it's the same in literature. When I was a kid, I used to love these Upponalle books about this teddy bear that goes missing and then is found by a little girl. And this little girl used to always say, "Voihan vessan oven kahva." And I'm sort of thinking that, do you think, from the researcher's perspective, that when the swearing transmits to cartoons or the literary scene, does it become poetry or does it become an exercise in creative writing? Because these don't necessarily then show up in the spoken language.
Before you answer the question, I'd like to just translate this vessan oven kahva, the handle to the loo door, to the toilet door.
Yeah, okay.
Is it poetry or swearing?
Or creative writing, I think you said. So are those the only two choices, poetry or creative writing?
I'm not giving a choice. I'm more like asking that, do you see that there's some kind of a stark or any kind of a difference between when swearing happens in the literary sphere versus in the, like, out there in the real world spoken?
I think as soon as you are in the written medium, there's an invitation to think a little bit more and make more of an effort to be creative, and you can really play. Perhaps when we are just speaking spontaneously, we don't have the bandwidth, the capacity to play in an advanced way, just very quickly. But when you're writing something, then we tend to think about it a little bit more. So I think there is a stylistic. We can fine tune it more when we're writing, and I think that that's something that we all kind of strive for, to have something nicely written.
Do we have any more questions? We have a few more minutes left. Oh.
We have one comment, I think, from the chat on the stream. Someone just wrote here that I read a Chinese book where they swore with the damned onion, jävla lök, på svenska, and it is an old book, berättelse från träskmarkerna, and it is a classic, Chinese classic from 12th century, so it's just an example of a very old swear word, I think, but talking about damned onion.
Beautiful.
Sounds innocent.
Yeah.
But then everybody
many
knows
layers
how
to that.
onions smell.
No, yeah.
They reek. I think with those words, damn onion, we'll end the discussion. Thank you very much, Kristi Beers-Fegersten. Thank you, Helga Hilmisdotter. Thank you, Elizabeth Peterson.
Thank you.
And thank you, of course, Milla Paloniemi.